Modernization under pressure, Japan versus the Ottoman Empire. By the mid-19th century, the world was rapidly changing. Western industrial powers were expanding their influence across the globe, being actively driven by new technologies, economics, and military strength. As historian Christopher Bailey explains, the modern world was shaped by unequal power relationships created by industrial capitalism. For non-Western empires, this created a clear choice. They either needed to modernize quickly or risk being dominated. Two major empires that faced this challenge were the Japan and the Ottoman Empire. Both encountered intense Western pressure between 1850 and 1950. However, their responses led to two very different outcomes. While Japan successfully transformed into a modern global power, the Ottoman Empire struggled to keep up and eventually collapsed. This contrast highlights the argument that although both attempted modernization, Japan's centralized reforms and selective adoption of Western models led to long-term success, while the Ottoman Empire's fragmented reforms and internal challenges contributed to its decline. In order to know these differences, it's important for one to understand Western pressure. During this period, new markets, raw materials, and strategic advantages were highly sought after by Western nations. Imperial expansion was driven by economic competition and political pressure. Industrialized countries had stronger militaries and economies, allowing them to force weaker states into unequal relationships. In Japan, this pressure became impossible to ignore when Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States arrived with a fleet of warships in 1853. From the beginning, his mission was clear. He was to force Japan to open its ports to American trade. After more than 2 centuries of isolation, Japan had little choice but to comply. The unequal treaties that followed exposed Japan's military weakness and threatened its sovereignty. Japanese leaders realized that if they did not change quickly, they could face the same fate as countries that had already been colonized. The Ottoman Empire faced similar but more prolonged pressure. Over time, it suffered repeated military defeats against European powers, which revealed its technological disadvantages. At the same time, European nations increased their economic influence over the empire. As historian Peter Gamori explains, the Ottomans experienced chronic fiscal weakness and increasing foreign financial control. This led to growing debt and dependence on European lenders. In addition, nationalist movements within the empire began to rise, challenging its authority. According to Dominic Levin, nationalists became one of the most dangerous forces undermining multi-ethnic empires like the Ottoman Empire. In response to these pressures, both empires attempted political reform. However, their approaches differed. In Japan, the turning point came with the Meiji Restoration in 1868. This event ended the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate and restored power to the emperor. More importantly, it marked the beginning of a centralized effort to modernize the country. The new government abolished the privileges of the samurai class and introduced a Western-style constitution and legal system. Japanese leaders believed that adopting aspects of Western civilization was necessary for survival. Their goal was not simply to copy the West, but to strengthen Japan as a nation. Beyond politics, both empires also recognized the need for military and economic modernization. Japan moved quickly, establishing a national army modeled after Western systems and building a modern navy. The government invested heavily in industrialization, the development of railroads and factories, and a national education system. One key effort was the Iwakura Mission, during which Japanese officials traveled to Western countries to study their institutions. Their goal was to learn from the West in order to strengthen the nation and enrich the people. This willingness to study and adapt played a major role in Japan's success. In contrast, the Ottoman Empire's efforts at modernization were less consistent. While it did attempt to reform its military, these efforts couldn't compare to Japan's and were underfunded. Economic challenges made modernization even more difficult. The empire relied heavily on foreign loans, which increased European control over its finances. As debt grew, it limited the empire's economic independence. Additionally, the loss of key trade routes reduced revenue, making it harder to invest in industry and infrastructure. As a result, industrial growth lagged behind both Europe and Japan. Social and cultural changes also played an important role in shaping each empire's outcome. In Japan, the government expanded education to support modernization and promote national unity. While the country adopted Western technology and ideas, it continued to maintain a strong sense of identity. This balance allowed Japan to modernize without losing its cultural foundations. The Ottoman Empire faced greater challenges in this area. Its population was highly diverse, with different religious and ethnic groups. Efforts to create legal equality sometimes disrupted traditional hierarchies, leading to tension and resistance. At the same time, nationalist movements grew stronger, creating loyalty to the empire. As Levin explains, empires struggled to survive in an age when loyalty to the state was increasingly replaced by loyalty to the nation. Ultimately, the outcomes of these reforms highlight the differences between the two empires. Japan successfully avoided Western colonization and emerged as a modern imperial power. Key factors like its centralized government, strong leadership, and willingness to fully restructure its political, military, and economic systems allowed it to finally compete with other global powerhouses. By the early 20th century, Japan was not just resisting Western influence. It was able to become a major power itself. The Ottoman Empire continued to lose territory and struggled with internal instability. Despite its reform efforts, it was unable to fully modernize or maintain control over its diverse population. After World War I, the empire collapsed, bringing an end to centuries of imperial rule. As Bailey notes, empires that could not modernize effectively were often absorbed or dismantled by global forces. In conclusion, both Japan and the Ottoman Empire faced intense Western pressure and attempted to modernize in response. However, their strategies determined their outcomes. Japan embraced Western models as tools to strengthen the nation, while the Ottoman Empire used reforms to preserve its existing system. Japan's willingness to fully adapt allowed it to secure independence and rise as a global power. In contrast, the Ottoman Empire's limited and uneven reforms were not enough to prevent its decline. This comparison overall shows that in a rapidly changing, Western-dominated world, survival depended not just on recognizing the need for change, but on how effectively that change was carried out. Thank you for listening.